Anna stepped cautiously onto the wide gravel path that cut through the base, her shoes crunching softly against the stones. The morning sun glinted off the camouflaged vehicles parked in neat rows, casting sharp reflections on the metal surfaces. She could hear the rhythmic clatter of boots on concrete from a distance, the sharp commands of instructors, and the occasional clang of metal as cadets moved equipment. The scent of diesel and freshly mown grass mingled in the crisp air, making her stomach twist nervously. A group of cadets leaning against the side of a building immediately noticed her. They nudged each other, eyes glinting with mischief. "Look who's wandering in," one murmured, a crooked smile spreading across his face. Another stepped forward, folding his arms, the sunlight catching the brass buttons of his uniform. "Do you think she knows she's in the wrong place?" he joked under his breath, drawing quiet chuckles from the others. Anna clutched her basket tighter, feeling the rough wicker press into her palms. Her fingers brushed against the edges of the cloth covering the supplies, seeking comfort. "Excuse me," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. "I'm just delivering these." She hoped politeness and distance would be enough to keep them from noticing how vulnerable she felt. One of the cadets stepped directly into her path, blocking her progress. The shadow he cast was long and angular, stretching across the gravel like a warning. "We'll see about that," he said, his tone half teasing, half threatening. The others shifted around him, forming a semicircle that tightened subtly, their presence making the morning feel suddenly smaller, almost suffocating. Anna's heart beat faster, each pulse echoing in her ears louder than the distant commands of drill exercises. She felt the warmth of embarrassment creeping up her neck, a tingling flush against her skin. The sun reflected off the cadets' polished boots and the steel railings nearby, casting fragmented glimmers across her vision. Her gaze flicked briefly to the barracks in the distance, rows of windows staring down like watchful eyes, before returning to the young men surrounding her. She drew in a deep breath, the mingled smells of diesel, dust, and sweat filling her lungs, trying to steady her shaking hands. Her instincts screamed at her to retreat, but the cadets' collective presence anchored her in place. Their laughter bubbled up again, low and mocking, like the rattle of distant machine parts. Anna's eyes darted to each face in turn, searching for any hint of kindness or restraint, but found none. The semicircle seemed unyielding, their shadows merging into a single dark mass across the gravel. The basket felt heavier in her hands, as if it absorbed the tension in the air. She knew that the moment of choice had arrived, whether to confront the intimidation with quiet dignity or let fear guide her next step. And in that suspended, sunlit morning, the entire base seemed to hold its breath with her. The barracks were quiet now, the usual clatter of boots replaced by low whispers and the rustle of uniforms as the cadets huddled together. The air inside smelled faintly of metal polish and sweat, mixed with the lingering aroma of stale coffee from the morning mess. Sunlight streamed through the narrow windows, cutting pale rectangles across the worn wooden floors. The group leaned against the bunks and lockers, their bodies tense with suppressed excitement, the energy of their plotting crackling between them like static. "We need to make her understand her place," one said, his fingers drumming nervously on the edge of a metal locker. The others nodded, their eyes glinting with anticipation. "She's just some ordinary woman, thinking she can walk in here without consequences," another added, voice low but firm, as if stating a law of their own creation. They imagined her bending to their demands, humiliated in front of everyone, and the thought drew small, sharp chuckles from the group. Outside the window, Anna could be seen moving between the supply sheds and training grounds, unaware of the whispers behind closed doors. The sunlight caught her hair, illuminating it in strands of gold against the muted green of her simple dress. A shiver ran down her spine, not from the cold, but from a sense of unease she couldn't shake. Something about the way the cadets had watched her made her stomach twist. Her basket felt heavier in her hands with each step, laden not only with supplies but with a growing, creeping anxiety. Back inside, the cadets continued to whisper, leaning closer to one another, as though sharing secrets that could never escape. The confines of the barracks, one pulled out his phone, scrolling and smirking as if already imagining how the scene would look to outsiders. "If we do this right," he murmured, "everyone will be talking about her by lunchtime." The others nodded, their expressions a mix of excitement and cruelty. Anna paused by the edge of the path, her fingers brushing against the rough fabric of the basket cover as though it could anchor her. The gravel crunched faintly beneath her shoes, each step echoing unnaturally loud in the otherwise calm morning. She glanced around, noting the neat rows of parked vehicles, the training obstacles, and the glint of steel helmets stacked in orderly towers. Her chest tightened, an instinctive warning prickling along her spine. Something wasn't right, and the instinct made her stomach churn with a mix of fear and determination. Inside the barracks, the cadets finally made a pact in hushed tones, their plan sealed with nods and suppressed laughter. Outside, Anna continued her work, unaware of the storm forming just steps away, a storm that would test her courage and resolve in ways she had never imagined. The base, usually a place of rigid discipline and routine, now seemed charged with anticipation, the quiet before a confrontation that promised to shock everyone involved. The training ground stretched out under the late morning sun, the freshly raked gravel and trimmed grass creating a stark contrast to the tension that now filled the air. Anna stood near the edge of the area, baskets set aside as the cadets closed in. Their polished boots crunched against the gravel, a sharp, rhythmic accompaniment to the laughter and jeers that rang out. The smell of sweat mixed with the earthy scent of the recently watered grounds, pungent and grounding at the same time, and Anna could feel the warmth of the sun on her back, pressing her into the moment. "Start with the boots," one cadet barked, stepping closer, his uniform crisp and perfectly ironed, the brass buttons reflecting the sun's glare. Anna's hands trembled slightly as she bent down, fingers brushing against the damp, muddy leather. The mud smelled sharp and bitter, a mixture of earth and sweat from the morning's drills. Her cheeks burned and she could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, the sneers cutting into her confidence like tiny knives. One cadet pulled out his phone, the screen bright in the sunlight recording her every move. "Do it faster!" another shouted, stomping a boot near her hands. Anna's breathing hitched, the rhythm of her pulse echoing in her ears. She gritted her teeth, refusing to let tears slip free. Her eyes flicked across the crowd of cadets, searching desperately for a sign of restraint, someone who might step in. Each face was a mask of amusement, reinforcing the isolation that pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. The basket she had carried felt impossibly far away, almost symbolic of the dignity she clutched onto. The gravel scraped her knees as she knelt, cold and rough against her skin, each movement a reminder of her vulnerability. The cadets' laughter rose, a high-pitched chorus that bounced across the open space. Anna's hands moved mechanically, scrubbing and wiping, her mind focusing on each motion, refusing to give them the satisfaction of panic or sobbing. Then a sharp voice cut through the chaos. "What is going on here?" The commanding officer appeared at the edge of the grounds, his presence immediate and absolute. The cadets froze, eyes wide, the phone lowering slowly. The officer's boots struck the gravel with authority, each step deliberate, sending a silent message of control. Anna felt a jolt of relief, her back straightening, the tension in her shoulders loosening slightly. The officer's gaze swept across the group, cold and unyielding, and for the first time that morning, the cadet's confidence faltered. Anna's hands rested briefly on the muddy boots, a small but defiant pause. She lifted her chin, letting her composure speak louder than words. As the officer stepped fully into the circle, cutting through the humiliation like a knife through fog, the sunlight reflected off his polished badges and the steel of the nearby equipment, framing the moment in stark, uncompromising clarity. The cadets knew, even before a word was spoken, that the balance of power had shifted. The commanding officer's gaze swept over the cadets, sharp and unwavering, the weight of authority radiating from him like heat from a furnace. The training grounds, moments ago filled with laughter and jeers, now felt charged with tense silence. Anna straightened fully, brushing imaginary dust from her dress and lifting her chin, her fingers still tinged with mud from the boots. The basket she had carried seemed lighter now, as if the officer's presence had lifted some of the suffocating pressure from her chest. "What is going on here?" The officer's voice rang out again, firmer this time, reverberating across the grounds. The cadets shuffled nervously, glancing at one another, unable to meet his piercing eyes. Anna spoke, her voice calm but clear, each word carrying a quiet strength that contrasted sharply with the cadets' earlier bravado. "They wanted to humiliate me," she said, meeting the officer's gaze without flinching. Her hands gripped the basket tightly, the wicker pressing into her palms, grounding her as she delivered the truth. The officer's expression hardened, the lines of his face deepening as he assessed the situation. He turned slowly to the cadets, his eyes narrowing. "You will report to the disciplinary officer immediately. he commanded, each word punctuated with authority. The cadets froze, a palpable tension rolling through their ranks, the earlier smugness evaporating like morning mist under the sun. One by one they were called forward, their postures stiff, their heads lowered as they obeyed without argument. Around the training grounds, the other cadets and personnel had begun to notice the commotion, pausing mid-task to watch. The usually bustling base fell into an unusual hush, the low hum of activity replaced by the quiet gravity of accountability. Anna could feel eyes on her, some filled with curiosity, others with newfound respect. The sun reflected off the vehicles and barracks, casting a natural, unfiltered light across the scene, highlighting the sharp contrast between authority and misbehavior. As the cadets filed past under the officer's watchful eye, Anna adjusted the basket, checking that the supplies inside were still intact. The warmth of the sun on her face felt steady, comforting, almost like an affirmation of her resilience. She began moving toward her original destination, each step deliberate, her boots pressing into the gravel with renewed confidence. The commanding officer remained nearby, a silent sentinel, ensuring that the lesson was clear. Arrogance and cruelty had consequences, and dignity could not be undermined so easily. The entire base seemed to exhale collectively, the tension ebbing like a tide receding. Anna's composed figure continued along the path, basket in hand, as the cadets disappeared into the shadows of the barracks, chastened and subdued. A quiet ripple of murmurs spread through the onlookers, the story of what had occurred, her calm courage in the face of humiliation already, beginning to reshape the perception of strength and respect across the base. In that sunlit moment, justice had been delivered, and Anna walked onward unshaken, the embodiment of quiet resilience,